In 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered something that was supposed to have been destroyed 4 years earlier. 20,000 pages of documents detailing a CIA program so disturbing, so fundamentally illegal, that the agency's own director had ordered every file shredded in 1973. But CIA Director Richard Helms made a mistake. He forgot about the financial records. Receipts. Invoices. Budget memos filed in a separate building, under a different classification system. And when those 20,000 pages were finally read by Senate investigators, what they described was not espionage. It was not intelligence gathering. It was the systematic destruction of human minds, conducted by the United States government on its own citizens, without their knowledge or consent. The program had a name. MKUltra. And what happened inside that program is not a conspiracy theory. It's documented fact, confirmed by congressional hearings, declassified files, and the testimony of survivors who lived through it. This is the story of how the most powerful intelligence agency in the world tried to crack the human mind. And what they were willing to do to anyone who got in the way. To understand MKUltra, you have to understand the fear that created it. The year was 1950, and American intelligence was terrified. During the Korean War, captured American soldiers appeared on camera denouncing the United States in language that sounded rehearsed and robotic. They confessed to crimes they hadn't committed. They praised communism with glassy eyes and monotone voices. And when they were eventually freed, many of them couldn't explain why they'd said what they said. The CIA called it brainwashing, a term coined by journalist Edward Hunter in 1950. And they were convinced that the Soviets and Chinese had cracked the code of mind control. If the enemy could reprogram American soldiers, what else could they do? Could they turn diplomats into spies? Could they create assassins who didn't know they were assassins? Could they control the mind of a president? The fear was real, even if the Soviet capabilities were wildly exaggerated. And in the paranoid logic of the Cold War, the CIA concluded that the only defense against enemy mind control was to develop mind control of their own. They needed to learn how to break a human mind. And then they needed to learn how to rebuild it into something useful. Whatever the cost. Whatever the method. Whatever the victim. Before MKUltra, there were its predecessors, programs with names that sounded almost innocent. Project BLUEBIRD, launched in 1950, aimed to discover methods of conditioning people to prevent information extraction by known means. In plain English, they wanted to make their own agents immune to enemy interrogation. But within months, the goal expanded. They didn't just want to defend against mind control. They wanted to use it. Project Artichoke, which replaced BLUEBIRD in 1951, went further. Declassified memos from the program asked questions that read like science fiction. Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature such as self-preservation? They were asking, in writing, on official government letterhead, whether they could create a human puppet. The methods they explored were not subtle. Hypnosis. Forced morphine addiction followed by withdrawal. Electroshock. Sensory deprivation. Prolonged isolation. Chemicals that induce terror, confusion, and amnesia. They tested these methods on prisoners, suspected spies, and in some cases, on people who had no idea they were being experimented on. Artichoke was dark. But what came next was darker. On April 13, 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles formally approved MKUltra. The program was placed under the command of Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist with a clubfoot and a stutter who raised goats on a farm in Virginia. Gottlieb was brilliant, eccentric, and, by any modern standard, a war criminal. MKUltra was vast. It encompassed 149 separate sub-projects spread across at least 80 institutions, including universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Columbia. Some of the most prestigious institutions in America received CIA funding to conduct experiments on human subjects, often without the subject's knowledge and always without meaningful consent. The scope of research was staggering. LSD, mescaline, barbiturates, amphetamines, heroin, psychological torture, sensory deprivation, verbal and physical abuse, electroshock therapy at levels far beyond any medical standard. Gottlieb believed that the key to mind control lay in finding a substance or technique that could completely dissolve a person's existing personality, allowing a new one to be programmed in its place. He called it depatterning. What it actually was the deliberate destruction of a human being's sense of self. What makes MKUltra truly horrifying isn't just what they did, it's who they did it to. In one sub-project, CIA operatives set up safe houses in San Francisco and New York where sex workers would lure unsuspecting men. The men were secretly given LSD in their drinks, and CIA agents watched through one-way mirrors, taking notes on how the subjects responded. This was called Operation Midnight Climax. It ran for years. In another sub-project, inmates at the Addiction Research Center in Lexington, Kentucky, most of them black men, were given LSD for 77 consecutive days. 77 days of forced psychedelic hallucination. The men were told they were receiving experimental treatment for their addiction. They were actually being used as human test subjects for the CIA. In yet another program, 7 patients at a mental hospital in Georgia were given massive doses of LSD and locked in dark rooms for weeks. One patient was kept on LSD for 174 days straight. The researchers noted that the subject lost all sense of identity, which was, horrifyingly, considered a success. These were not enemy agents. These were American citizens, drug addicts, sex workers, mental patients, prisoners. People society wouldn't listen to. People nobody would believe. That's why they were chosen. No single figure in MKUltra history is more disturbing than Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron. Cameron was president of the American Psychiatric Association, the Canadian Psychiatric Association, and the World Psychiatric Association. He was one of the most respected psychiatrists on the planet. And he used that reputation to conduct experiments that can only be described as torture. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Cameron developed a process he called psychic driving. Patients who came to him for treatment of mild depression, anxiety, or postpartum issues were subjected to a systematic destruction of their personalities. Step 1. Put the patient into a drug-induced coma for weeks or months using barbiturates and chloral hydrate. Step 2. Administer electroshock therapy at 30 to 40 times the normal voltage, multiple times per day. Step 3. Play a recorded message on a loop, sometimes for 16 hours a day, for weeks, until the message was absorbed into what remained of the patient's consciousness. Cameron's goal was to erase a person's mind completely and rebuild it from scratch. He called it beneficial. His patients called it something else. Many emerged unable to recognize their own families. Some lost years of memory. Some couldn't feed themselves or control their bladders. Some never recovered. The CIA funded Cameron through a front organization. The patients were never told. On November 28, 1953, a man fell from the 13th floor of the Hotel Statler in New York City. His name was Frank Olson, and he was a biochemist working for the U.S. Army at Fort Detrick, Maryland. The official story was suicide, a troubled man who jumped from his hotel window during a mental breakdown. 22 years later, the truth emerged. 9 days before his death, Olson had been secretly given LSD by Sidney Gottlieb at a CIA retreat. The drug triggered a severe psychological crisis. Olson became paranoid, agitated, convinced that the CIA was going to silence him. He told his colleague that he was going to quit and tell the whole story. He never got the chance. The circumstances of his death have been disputed for decades. In 1994, his body was exhumed and examined by forensic pathologist James Starrs. Starrs found a previously undetected fracture on Olson's skull, consistent with a blow to the head before the fall. His conclusion: the evidence points to homicide rather than suicide. No one has ever been charged. In 1975, the Olson family received a personal apology from President Gerald Ford and a financial settlement from the government. But no one went to prison. No one ever does. In 1973, amid the Watergate scandal and growing public distrust of government, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKUltra files. He didn't want anyone to know what had been done. Thousands of documents were fed into shredders. Years of research, records, and evidence of crimes against American citizens were reduced to confetti. But Helms missed the financial records. And when those records surfaced in 1977, the Senate launched the Church Committee investigation. Sidney Gottlieb was called to testify. He claimed to have a poor memory. He said he couldn't recall specific experiments. He said the program had been a failure, that mind control was impossible and the whole thing was a waste of money. But here's the question that still hangs over everything. If MKUltra was truly a failure, why did Helms order every document destroyed? If nothing of value was discovered, why the cover-up? Agencies don't shred evidence of failure. They shred evidence of success. Here's what keeps researchers up at night. We know about 149 sub-projects. But MKUltra ran for 20 years across dozens of institutions. The surviving documents represent maybe 10% of the total files. 90% were destroyed. What was in those files? What experiments were conducted that were too disturbing even for the documents that survived? What techniques were developed that worked? We know the CIA continued researching behavioral modification long after MKUltra was officially shut down. Programs like MKSARCH and MKNOMI carried on elements of the research into the 1970s. And some researchers believe that the techniques pioneered under MKUltra, particularly the use of drugs and psychological manipulation in interrogation, resurfaced in the CIA's post-2001 Enhanced Interrogation program. The methods described in the Senate's 2014 torture report bear an unsettling resemblance to the techniques Cameron used in Montreal 60 years earlier. MKUltra is not ancient history. It is the foundation on which modern interrogation and psychological operations were built. And the most terrifying thing about it isn't what we know. It's what we don't know. Because the files are gone. And the people who could tell us what was in them are either dead or still not talking. What do you think was in those destroyed files? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to Dark Truth for more mysteries that hide in plain sight. The truth is always darker than you think.